This is the Greg Bedard Patriots Podcast with Nick Cattles.
What's happening? We got a game coming up this weekend. We got a big trade to talk about. Let's start with the Stephon Gilmore trade. Did you like it?
No, I hated it. Yeah, I mean, look, I don't understand it in a variety of ways. The only thing, Nick, that really explains why Bill would make this deal now and take what he did is if he had some suspicion. I'm not saying it's factual, but he had some thought that Stephon Gilmore, and first of all, let me backtrack and explain things to people. When you are on the physically unable to perform list, and you are in the final year of your contract like Stephon Gilmore is, you have to get off of PUP or else your contract tolls. So basically, if Stephon Gilmore just says my quad hurts the whole year and the Patriots never activate him, we're right back here next year. He's on the books for $7 million for next season. So Stephon Gilmore has to come off of PUP to get his service time. He has to be active. He has to be placed on the active roster. He doesn't actually have to play in a game. He needs to do that because that gives him his service time. That means he's played this year. He'll be a free agent next year. So the only way this deal makes any sense to me, Nick, is if Bill Belichick had some thought, some suspicion that Stephon Gilmore, because of their contract negotiations, would not play this year. That he would basically get cleared off of PUP, get passed on his physical, and then be placed on the active roster. And as soon as he's placed on the active roster, basically fake an injury. That's the only explanation I have, Nick, because it doesn't make any sense. There's no, especially there's a cornerback shortage in the NFL. There's a cornerback shortage on the Patriots. They're now down to J.C. Jackson, Jonathan Jones, and Jalen Mills, and that's it. That's basically all they have. There are no cornerbacks, and for the Patriots to be like, oh yeah, we're going to trade away a guy who was Defensive Player of the Year 2 years ago, and it was still a pretty good, decent number one cornerback last year, and who knows what he would have come back as this year. For them to just trade him away for a 6th-round pick, it makes absolutely no sense to me.
Yeah, I don't like it.
And when he's making no money. He's not making any money.
I don't like it. I don't get it. And there's a number of different things that I don't like and don't get. First of all, you just spelled out everything currently where this leaves the secondary. You know that I was not a huge fan of the Jalen Mills signing if he's going to stay at the outside corner spot. Yep. I think that's a disaster waiting to happen. And now this puts him at the forefront of being that guy. And I think it's a gigantic downgrade from Gilmore to Mills. There's no doubt about that. But then you look back at the situation. This is something we've talked about for the last, close to a year. Everybody knew Gilmore was going to want a new contract. Everybody knew the situation heading into the trading deadline last year. The reports, correct me if I'm wrong, Greg. I'm not saying these reports are from you. I don't remember specifically what you wrote about the situation. Right. But I know people were saying and writing that, there was some talk about Gilmore before the trading deadline. And Belichick wanted a lot for Gilmore. He could have gotten maybe a 1st-round pick from some teams, most likely a 2nd-round pick, because those teams knew Gilmore would want a new contract. Belichick at the trading deadline last year decided not to pull the trigger on a deal. Now, people will say, well, Nick, they needed Gilmore for last season. I would say they finished 7-9. What did you need him for? So you could have made the deal before the deadline. You didn't. Then he gets injured. Now it makes it everything, everything turns murky. You head into the offseason. Again, you could have had conversations with people. From what I have read, and all I can do is go off of what I read. I don't know sources. I don't talk to people in the building. From what I read, Belichick showed pretty much zero urgency to try to get a trade done with Gilmore because he thought they would be able to restructure his contract. Well, thought he blew a fart, but he really shit his pants. He thought wrong. Like if you look at restructuring, Gilmore wasn't going to restructure with the Patriots for whatever reason. So You didn't trade him at the trade deadline last year. You didn't try to trade him during the offseason. You said, well, we're going to restructure him, or we think we have leverage, so we'll be able to restructure him and keep him this season. And you ended up reading that wrong. And so you end up with a 6th-round pick in 2023 for a guy who's a top 5 cornerback in the league when he's healthy. I don't know how anybody can look at that and say it's a win, or that it's, try to explain that away. To me, that's a clear loss for Belichick. You cannot allow a guy who is as talented as Gilmore to walk away, to get out of your building for a 6th-round pick 2 years from now. Like, to me, that is a mismanagement of the asset. And
Nick, yeah. I absolutely agree with you. We've been talking about it for a long time. We've been talking about it on this podcast for a year. We talked about it's a trade line. Everybody, Nick, this is how blatantly obvious the situation was that the Patriots had to trade Stephon Gilmore. Gilmore put his house on the market. Like, that's him and his agent talking, and his agent going like, the Patriots aren't idiots. If they know whether they're going to give you a contract extension or not. Like, if they're 2-5, I think they were 2-5 at the deadline. That was after. I just want to go back and look, but it was over. I think that was after the Bills loss. Hang on one second, because I want. So they were 2-5. Yeah, I think the Bills lost. I think the trade deadline was right after that, because November 1st was the Bills loss. They're 2-5. And that's when Bill started making the excuses on radio. He knew that was the line of demarcation. They win that game. They got a chance. They fumbled. Cam Newton fumbled. It was over. Stephon Gilmore putting his house on the market. That's him and his agent talking, being like, dude, they're not giving you a contract extension. If you walk, they're only going to get, if you walk in healthy and get a big contract, they're only going to get a 3rd-round pick. They're not going to franchise you and then try to trade you. And you're gone. That you just put your house on the market. They're going to trade you. And Belichick I don't know if he froze or what, Nick, but he screwed it up. And I don't want to hear anything about like, oh, well, he got hurt. And first of all, as soon as he got hurt in that game, I said, I tweeted something along the lines of, this will probably be the last time we see Stephon Gilmore as a Patriot because of what the situation was. And I don't want to hear anything about the injury. It's football. It's all part of the calculation. You have to say, well, there's a chance that a guy could get injured or he could get in trouble off the field. Like, you got to deal with it in hand. You just can't take it for granted that the guy's going to be there in 6 months and his status isn't going to change. And so it was just a complete fail at the deadline. Everybody knew he should have been traded. Bill asked for too much. He panicked. He kept him, and he lost. It was a big L.
One question for you, though. In fairness, we go back to camp, and you had said that giving Gilmore a bump it didn't make much sense to you unless he got out there on the field.
Yep.
So to me, I just want to make sure we clarify this. At the point when you got to camp, there really was nothing that you could do at that moment, right? Like, I did not want Belichick to give Gilmore an extension of any kind until Gilmore was out there showing that he can play at 31 years old with a torn quad.
Yeah, I agree. Mm-hmm.
The mistakes were made last year at the deadline and then in the offseason, before you got to camp. Once you got to camp, it was what it was, as Bill would say.
The hay was in the barn. The hay was in the barn. And now the mistake is the mistake is last year at the trade deadline or before, not getting rid, because you knew how it was going to play out. And the Patriots knew they didn't want to give a 30-something Stephon Gilmore the kind of mega extension that he was looking for. And it was blatant from all his contract maneuverings that he wanted one more. He wanted to squeeze one more big deal out of everything. I want to get from saying I need a raise to play last year, blah, blah, blah.
I want to get to another question before we get to JC Jackson quickly. What do you make of Gilmore going to Carolina, not getting a bump, being willing to play the rest of the season on the money he was set to make with the Patriots? What do we make of that?
That's pretty typical. And I was surprised, and I was the first one to report this. I was surprised. I asked, I have pretty good sources in Carolina, and I was like, all right, so for a 6th-round pick, you must have agreed to give him a mega deal, right? Or some sort of bump. And they're like, nope, no bump, no contract. And they said, from their understanding, that he would have been willing to do the same in New England if the Patriots would have entertained a contract extension in the offseason, and the Patriots would not. Now, I don't know how much I believe it. I think some of it is true. Nick, this is the way I read it, though. I read it that when you're on a team and you've performed for a team, you expect a certain amount of respect in return. And this also somewhat goes to Brady. That you say, all right, well, I take care of you on the field and I do everything you ask me to do. You're going to take care of me. That does not include signing like 4 free agents that make more money than me. When for years you've kept it carefully, hey, I can't sign X because I'm paying Julian Edelman this, or I can't. And I agree with that approach. I think it's worked for them. But as soon as the Patriots gave up big money this offseason and changed their MO, all of a sudden Stephon and other people are looking at it like, dude, these guys haven't played it down for you. I've won you Super Bowls and you won't give me anything. What's the deal? So I think it was a point where Stephon Gilmore said, yeah, I'll pay for the $7 million. Not for you, for somebody else, but not for you.
Where's this leave J.C. Jackson? He's the number 1, obviously, but what's this mean for his future?
I mean, he's in the driver's seat, Nick. They're going to have to either overpay him or pay him market value, or at the very least, they're going to have to franchise tag him for a year, if not 2. So the franchise tag after this year is it's $17.5 million for cornerback. That means if they tag him in year 2 to keep him again, you're talking $21 million or something like that. And if I'm JC Jackson's agent and negotiations have not gone well there, JC over the past has expressed some frustration to the media on Instagram. He wants a big deal. He wants generational wealth. He wants to set up his family. And I think he was a little bit insulted that the Patriots gave him a 2nd-round tender as an RFA. I thought that, the Patriots were playing the game with, well, nobody has any cap space, so we're gonna try to tag him lower and we'll just always match, where he thought he should have gotten a 1st-round tender and should have gotten more money. And that didn't happen. So I think they know exactly that if they go to market, they are getting paid big time. And so the negotiations start with a 2-year franchise tag. That's about $40 million guaranteed over the first 2 years, if not more. I can't. I don't know if the Patriots can do that. I would say he's headed to be franchised.
One quick last thing. It just goes back to this offseason. We all thought that the Patriots would likely draft a cornerback, or many of us did, because of the Gilmore situation. They decided not to draft a young cornerback. They decided to sign Jalen Mills. And now you're in this kind of a mess in the secondary, not only currently, but also in the future. You have to imagine that Belichick is going to no doubt address the cornerback position, this coming off season. But for now, you've got what you've got. Let's get into Belichick in the personnel decisions he's made, especially over the past 4 or 5 years. I know you wrote about this at BSJ. I haven't been able to check out the piece, but you numbered all of these different deals year to year, and especially the ones that did not work out. I see that you're questioning what Belichick is doing in personnel. Tell people why you're questioning that and kind of what led you to write what you wrote this week.
Yeah. So, I mean, the big thing is, if those of you that haven't seen the story, I went in depth on about 4 different deals. The Gilmore deal, basically the premise of it is blue chips out of this program, not much back. Gilmore for a 6th. Joe Tooney walks in free agency with no compensation after he should have been traded. Tom Brady's last extension and how that it gave him a free pass out. Like, we're not arguing about whether or not it should have been done or not. But the fact of the matter is, you let a franchise quarterback leave with no compensation, and you added to your dead cap by giving him that extension in the last year when you didn't need to do that. He could have just played out his deal and been done and you could have gotten that 3rd-round compensation pick. The Jimmy Garoppolo deal, too late. It's basically blue chippers going out, not much coming back, and them being too late and not early enough. And then I had a list of other sort of footnoted deals that didn't really ideally work out. So my big thing is, like, So that's one thing. Blue chippers going out. The other thing, and I think this is an overall thing, and I'm going to write about it this weekend at Boston Sports Journal, is Nick, for years, and I love this about Belichick, you could basically, he always had a backup plan. He always had a succession plan just about every place. Like if somebody, like at running back, going from whatever they had, Kevin Falk to Shane Vereen to James White to, slot, Wes Welker to Julian Edelman, just go down the line. You could always see like, okay, I can understand them making this deal because they have X, Y, or Z in the pipeline.
Right.
There's no pipeline anymore, Nick. There's no succession plan. Like, and I think we mentioned it last week. Like, for example, like I think this team and Mac Jones sorely misses a slot receiver. Like, you knew the clock was ticking. I mean, whether it's Rob Gronkowski, they didn't do anything at tight end with Rob Gronkowski winding down. Didn't draft anybody of note. Didn't draft anybody high. Wide receiver's been a disaster. Slot receiver, they let go. Who's next? Who's next at free safety after Devin McCourty? Who's next after that Stephon Gilmore and J.C. Jackson are going to be gone, are going to be high priced in the next couple of years? Like the cornerback situation highlights the lack of succession plans anymore with the Patriots, and I don't understand it, Nick, because I that was one of the beauties of how the Patriots worked in personnel, that you could see the succession plan. It was seamless. Next guy up, blah, blah, blah. I don't see it really anywhere, Nick. And look at quarterback too. They had Garoppolo, but there were a couple years where they could have done something else at quarterback to be ready for when Brady was gone, and they weren't, and they had to sign Cam Newton. Like, all of this has been very un-Belichick-like, and I don't understand what has happened. I don't understand why it's like this now.
The quarterback thing is tough. It's very tough to transition from a legitimate franchise quarterback to find that next guy. It doesn't always fall perfectly for some teams, like the Colts with Andrew Luck from Manning, like Rodgers from Favre. It doesn't always work that way. I mean, look at Pittsburgh this year. That is a disaster. You've got to hope that a quarterback falls to you that you like. You don't want to give up too much at the time to move up because you're trying to surround Brady with weapons. It's very difficult to find that succession plan. And so I don't necessarily kill Belichick for how all
Nick, I understand that. I understand it's difficult to do it. I would have liked to have seen them just attempt it. I mean, they had to trade Jimmy Garoppolo. They should have gotten a quarterback high in the draft. They knew now the window was tightened again, and Belichick knew that Brady wasn't going to stick
But
around.
again, my point is, who could they have gotten? Who was there that was available? Did they like the guy that was available? All of those questions. I mean, yes, in theory, I agree with you. In theory, Belichick, his mistake wasn't necessarily letting Brady walk because of the contract and all the stuff that happened with the Falcons. We've talked about that. There's no doubt a bigger issue with Belichick not being, maybe more aggressive or ready for when Brady left to have somebody to plug into the system. I agree with that general thought. My point is, when we have that conversation, there's a ton of context that goes along with it. And you've got to go into each year and say, okay, who was available? What do you give up? Do you give that up to move up? Is Brady going to get pissed? Et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of different working things that go into that bigger picture thought. I'd also say,
Nick, hang on. I can't let this go yet. I understand what you're saying, but
just know that you gave me a time. You just let me know you gave me a.
I know. I just want to get this in real quick.
You gave me a time limit today.
That, look, they traded Jimmy Garoppolo in 2017.
Yeah.
They didn't draft a quarterback in 2018, and they drafted Jarrett Stidham in 2019.
Right.
Like, you got they should have drafted a quarterback or done something at the quarterback position in 2018.
They drafted Brissett. They swung and missed. They drafted Stidham. They swung and missed. Now you could argue, hey, they should have drafted somebody in the top 2 or 3 rounds. But again, at the same time, you've got Brady bitching about his weapons. You're trying to get better to surround him with talent and make the most of his window. All I'm saying is this. I'm not I'm not disagreeing with you, Greg, or anybody that says Belichick did not have the quarterback situation set in the right way when Brady left. My point is, it's not an easy thing to do. And what you're trying to do, and we see this with the Steelers, we saw it with the Saints, who, they locked into Jameis Winston on a low money deal, and their offense isn't very good, by the way. It's very difficult. And you see this with the Packers. The Packers drafted Jordan Love. That became a disaster. The toughest challenge for any NFL team is to go from a legitimate franchise quarterback to that next guy immediately.
I understand it. I just wanted them to attempt it, and plus Lamar Jackson was right there at their pick. So, I mean, that's all I know it's hard, and I'm not saying they could have knocked it out. I said attempt it. You knew, Belichick knew. He had to trade Garoppolo. Now he knew, all right, well, I need to get a new succession plan. He punted on it in 2018.
It's a delicate balance. Again, it's a delicate balance because you're trying to, if you spend a first-round pick on Lamar Jackson, then what happens with Brady? What's he have to say? Do you have to rush Jackson in? Again, you're trying to coddle the greatest quarterback of all time, but yet you're also trying to prepare yourself to be ready for when he leaves. And I also think Belichick thought that Brady was going to stay and that they would be able to work out short-term deals. And that was a swing and a miss. But again, I think my point is pretty clear. I just think, look at every team in the NFL, every other team. It's incredibly difficult to have an Andrew Luck situation or Aaron Rodgers situation play out. It's incredibly difficult. They had their guy in Garoppolo, and Brady beat Father Time, and so they had to adjust. They could have done more, sure. But if you did more, would you not do right by Brady? And would that have started a whole different firestorm? And people would have been bitching that they drafted a young quarterback instead of surrounding Brady, like people bitch like I do about drafting Jordan Love instead of surrounding Rodgers. Let's get to the Texans game quickly. But first, the Legends. I got to tell you about Legends, a premium athletic apparel built for the modern athlete, owned by some of your favorite athletes, including Willie McGinnis himself. You can visit legends.com, use code PATS20 to save 20% on your first order. Again, it's PATS20, save 20% on your first order. That ends on October 10th. So just a couple of days from right now. You got to jump in, people. Yeah, you got to get on it. You got until Sunday, and I'm telling you, this stuff is top of the line. We have been talking about it for the last several weeks. Greg and I both love it. The hoodie's awesome. The shorts are awesome. Go check it out, legends.com, and don't forget to use PATS20 to save 20% on your first order. Texans, we're not going to spend a ton of time on this. Obviously a couple of quick hits. David Culley seems like he's way underwater already, which shouldn't surprise people. They are not very good defensively, Greg. Nick Caserio is trying to rebuild this roster on the fly. They've got the Deshaun Watson headache, which I think they've completely mismanaged. And so now without Tyrod Taylor being available, which has been, unfortunately for him, the story of his career, they have Davis Mills at quarterback. Last week against the Bills at Buffalo, their first half of offense was one of the, if not the worst first half offensive displays I've seen in NFL history. Just your quick
You've seen a lot of crappy NFL football.
I've seen a lot of crappy NFL football, and I'll tell you, this one takes the cake last week. Your quick, 1 minute breakdown of Houston, if you have one.
I don't have much. I am interested in a little, reunion with the ex-Patriots, many of whom, by the way, side note, I'll be interested to see. We'll probably see a Bill Belichick embrace of Jack Easterby during this game. First of all, Jack Easterby in Seth Wickersham's book, one of the curveballs I did not see coming was Jack Easterby basically standing up to Robert Kraft. Gee, I wonder where he got this from. I wonder who told him this anecdote. Jack Easterby. That basically Jack Easterby stood up to Robert Kraft and said, "You're not being fair to Bill Belichick. I stand with Bill. He's the greatest coach of all time." Basically something like that. There was some sort of moment like
very, that. Very dramatic Jack Easterby moment.
So we get Brandon Cooks, Danny Amendola, Rex Burkhead, Marcus Cannon, Nick Caserio. Ooh, all the feels, Nick, all the feels. Look, I'll be interested to see I want to watch how the Patriots offense, if they have any offensive linemen for this game, or maybe they're just going to go 7-on-7, like just one guy snapping in the middle of the field type of thing. I assume the way they're operating, it seems like they're confident that some of those guys are going to be back from COVID and whatnot. I think the Texans defense is decent. I think it can give them some trouble. I think they have some good players out there. Their offense is horrible. I mean, Tunsil's good at left tackle. Marcus Cannon is there. I'll be interested to see how he looks.
I don't think he's
not.
playing.
Oh, he's not playing.
I'm not sure.
I have not seen any Texans film. I'll be watching that today. I'm interested in seeing Davis Mills, who's a guy I think that the Patriots were intrigued about as a later round prospect if earlier QB play did not work out.
Yeah, and I'll just say my concern, obviously, you just hit, is the offensive line. At practice, they've been missing 4 of their starting 5. That could even the game out just a little bit. I mean, obviously, I think the Patriots are a much better football team than Houston, but their offensive line has not been good, as we've highlighted. And if you're losing 4 of the 5 guys up front, that could be a disaster. And I also think Houston's going to have a hair across their ass. I mean, they went to Buffalo last week and got embarrassed. David Culley admitted, hey, we weren't ready. We got embarrassed. It was a terrible game for them. I would imagine, at least at the start of this game, they're going to be very motivated to try to show people that they're not as much of a laughingstock as they were last week against the Bills. Pats +9 is the line. What are you thinking about that?
Patriots. I'm taking the Patriots. They hopefully they blow doors. They should.
Yeah, I think they'll I just don't see Houston's offense scoring much more than 10, 13 points. So I think the Patriots can get into the 20s. So I take the Pats laying the points at the -9 number there. BostonSportsJournal.com member question of the day, $39.99 on the annual plan. Top-notch analysis of all the Boston pro sports, video analysis Bedard does on the coach's film for the Pats, direct access to him in weekly chats. Do we have a question, Greg?
Just some general sort of, because everybody gets their backs all up, when you talk about Bill Belichick's failed dealings. So just to explain a couple things, and basically the list that I put on there, those were like minor. You can quibble with them. They weren't outright like god awful trades, like Gronkowski for a 4th. That's more from the why isn't he on your team anymore? And why did you even have to trade him? And he's outperformed a 4th round pick from the end of last year to this year. He's outperformed that. So there's no reason. It's more of why isn't he here? Why did you have to trade him? And the Chandler Jones trade, I liked at the time, but I thought that was contingent on Jonathan Cooper being a player. He was awful and did nothing for you, and to just get a 2nd round pick. Look, I understand they had to trade Chandler Jones. He wanted a ton of money. They've never given an edge guy money. I knew they were going to trade him. I predicted they would. What'd you say? Yeah, till Judon. They'll pay other outside. They'll play other edge players, just not their own. And I just thought, look, I thought Jonathan Cooper had a ton of upside. I thought Dante Scarnecchia could fix him, and you'd have a Pro Bowl guard. Didn't happen. He was awful. I don't even think he's in the league anymore.
No,
he was not a good player. So that definitely downgrades the trade. No doubt about it.
Yeah. And I think, listen, when everybody in this business kind of gives their opinions on trades, that's our job to give the opinions on trades. But it's, to me, it's the football team's job to get those trades right. And so, we're not running the football team. So yes, we're going to be wrong. A number of times. That's part of this business. Like you throw your hat in the ring and you're going to be wrong. And looking at, all the deals together in the past few years, you can make your own assessments about Belichick. We're out of time. I wish we had more, but we're out of time. It's the Greg Bedard Patriots Podcast with Nick Cattles. Don't forget legends.com, legends.com. Pats20 is that code. You have until Sunday to get 20% off of your first order as we get closer to the holidays. He's Greg. I'm Nick. We'll watch the game on Sunday. It better be a W. We'll be back early next week to react to that. Until then, have a great weekend. Be healthy, be good, and we'll see you.